I got a little excited there for a moment. Someone came up at the end. I thought God was actually reaching down, and so whoever that was, I'm glad that you got your offering in. Just a couple other things just about the Leadership Institute for you to be mindful of. That even in the Church of Resurrection, that's large and got all that stuff. They have their own technical challenges. They had problems with their sound at one time, and at another time, while Pastor Hamilton was preaching, the lights went out on him. So that was good fun had by all of us who sat around. It's like, thank God it happens there too, kind of scenario. So, yay, Matthew. Yeah, I am on the back. I think I'm on the back end of a sinus. Cold kind of head doohickey, whatever's going on. I just share that with you now so that I can say that I'm not responsible for anything I'm about to preach. But I do invite you to be in prayer with me as we begin. Father, thank you again for your love and for your grace. Thank you for the ways in which you've already been speaking to us this morning and the ways in which you guide and direct our steps. We ask now that your Holy Spirit would truly come and be the interpreter and the translator of these words so that we can truly be more like you and less like the world. Help us to hear what you would have us hear. Help us to walk more closely with you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So we're going to continue. We've been doing, we just finished up the sermon series on the power of words, wanted to talk about how do we talk in this highly contentious time. And then next week I'll start in on a new sermon series on who will we be. And the question really is, who will we be if our political party wins? And who will we be if our political party doesn't win? And who will we be if we don't care which party wins? Right? And so that's what we'll be talking about. In between now, I'm going to do a bridge titled Make God Great Again. And we'll see how that goes. But in this heat of election seasons, I think Christians sometimes find themselves swept up in debates, divisions, and political allegiances. I mean, we got things coming at us from all different directions. And I think in many ways we might find ourselves stuck in this kind of a downward spiral, searching for ways to restore America's greatness. I cannot believe that most Americans aren't wandering around saying, how do we get here, and how can we get to a place where we're much better than where we are right now? Am I true? Or accurate with that statement? I guess there's a better way of saying that, right? I don't care what political party you're affiliated with. I really do think that most Americans believe that there's something missing today, and we're asking, how do we get back to something better? And while political solutions and strong leadership are important, I believe we're overlooking a crucial element in our quest for this national renewal that we're looking for. And I think that by looking at this 1 Samuel 8 this morning and looking at a journey that Israel took that I think is very similar to the current direction that we're facing right now, we might learn a thing or two. The Israelites' demand for a king in 1 Samuel 8, it arose from a complex interplay of internal challenges and external forces. There were things happening within, and then there were things that were happening without that was kind of compressing on Israel, creating this pressure cooker kind of a moment. Internally, what was happening is that the nation faced a leadership crisis. Samuel was getting old. And so the next folks that were supposed to step into the role of leadership were his two sons. And they weren't exactly, cream of the crop kinds of folks. They would get to the offering time, and they would take, a larger portion that they would keep for themselves, for example. There was all kinds of things that were happening in this process. And so what's happening here is that the inability to trust the institutions was creating uncertainty about the future. And it eroded confidence in the decision makers. Now, my question for you, am I on the right track? Right? Can you see how the Bible speaks to 2024? Right? We're facing similar kinds of things. The people then wanted to make a change. Right? Isn't that what we're often saying? We need to make a change. And so they said, we want a king like all other nations. Now, I know we're not saying that, but we'll see in a moment why that is so parallel to seeing things that are happening here. Now, when they said that, when they said, we want a king like other nations, they were not becoming a kingdom of atheists. They weren't abandoning their religion. They very much still believed in God. What we see in this declaration is a nation that was in a crisis of trust. Still tracking? Sound familiar? Right? The crisis of trust, though, was not because God had failed. The crisis of trust was because people who were entrusted with the responsibility of making disciples had broken that trust. Now, I'm using that term, make disciples, purposefully, right? That would not have been the language they would have used, but they had been taught that, hey, when we enter into the promised land, what were they to do? They were to take these stones, right? And they would stack these stones. And why would they stack these stones? So kids would ask the question, why do they stack those stones there? That's a silly place to put those stones. And what would happen? The parents, the leaders, would retell the story. They would have Passover and they would tell the story. Right? So the generations of leaders were responsible for passing on. But what happens when that trust gets broken? There's some folks that are sitting here that when they were little, the trust of their parents got broken. And as a result, they've had difficulty in trusting anybody in authority, anybody in leadership positions. It takes a lot of work to overcome that. And so the new generation of would-be disciples found themselves having to put faith in people like Samuel, who was not willing to correct the misguiding activity of his children, these children who were misusing their power and authority. And as a result, while they're observing all this going on, they're like, we're supposed to put our trust in that? And that trust becomes shattered. They begin to question things around them. And so I invite you, I don't have time this morning, but to go and read Ezekiel 34. It's a description about shepherds and about the responsibility that shepherds have. And oftentimes when we hear the word shepherds, we think about pastors. We think about Christian leaders in that context. And that is what it's talking about. It sets up to talk about David as the good shepherd. It goes and sets up to talk about Jesus as the great shepherd, right, in that process. But I want you to understand this morning that when I talk about shepherds, I'm thinking about the idea that to whom much is given, much is expected, right? And we as Christians understand the power that comes with being forgiven, right? We understand what it means that all that we didn't have, that we now have because we walk with this power of forgiveness, and we walk with this promise of a new life and a new beginning. So in other words, we've been given great responsibility. We're called to be shepherds, right? And to move in that direction. So if you're a Christian and your family is a mess, it will reflect poorly on the message of Christ. It'll be hard for you to have integrity to talk about Christ in your life. If you're a Christian and you cheat at work, right? You go home early and you come in late, or you just do half the work, those kind of things, it will reflect poorly on the message of Christ. If you're a Christian student and you show up in school and you're not putting your best effort forward, you're just trying to slide by, right? You're going to miss out on opportunities to talk about Christ. So what's at stake if we Christians fail to do our jobs, if we fail to be dispensers of hope, if we fail to be offerers of love? What's at stake? In this case, it was the rejection of God as their king. If we fail to do our jobs as Christians, people reject God. God said, you are the body of Christ. That when people see you, when people interact with you, it's their opportunity. Just as Philip says, show us the Father. And he says, have you not seen? I've been here all with you. When you see me, you see the Father. So yes, I'm trying to put a heavy yoke on your shoulders. But Jesus also says, hey, when you wear that yoke, and I'm yoked with you, it's not that heavy. But we have to understand that we really do have a tremendous responsibility. So when people reject God, it creates an existential crisis. People are wandering around today saying, why am I here? What's my purpose? What's the meaning in life? And what that does is it paves a way for a strong, charismatic leader or movement or whatever to surface and claim the position of God. Now, they don't come, in today's, if someone came out and said, I am God, we would have a different reaction, right? It's kind of like, if the devil showed up at your house, in the traditional way of pitchfork and flaming red, you would slam the door and run out the back as quickly as possible, right? Okay, are you still with me? Is my mic working? Yeah, okay. Would you run out or would you welcome him in? All right. So I'm saying if someone stood up and said, my campaign speech is, I am God, I will restore everything, I will venture most of us would say, you got to be kidding me, right? So that's not the normal way. It's a subtle trap. But what happens when we're in pain, when we're anxious, don't we get a little bit excited about someone who comes along and says, don't worry, trust me. I've got a plan. I've got a better way, right? I can lead us out of this. I can rescue you from these things. Their desire for a king, and I'm talking about Israel, was like all other nations, reflected a short-sighted preference. Their desire to be like all the other nations around them shows how easily we can immediately follow along in someone who says, I can rescue you from this situation, not knowing we haven't read the fine print. And sometimes we will give away our birthright for a cup of soup. Remember the story of Jacob and Esau? He was so hungry, he's like, just give me some soup. I hope it was good soup, right? But we'll do the same thing. Their birthright was to be a holy nation, a people set apart. God said to Abram, I will make you a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. God says, I'll be your provider. I will be your protector. I will be what you need. But they gave away their birthright because this is the point I want you to hear. Those who were entrusted with much proved to be irresponsible with that trust. If you've received God's grace, if you've received God's mercy, if you've received God's forgiveness, and you're holding it back and giving that to others, you're not proving to be responsible with that trust. Just as Samuel warned the Israelites about the pitfalls of relying solely on human leadership, we too must consider whether our focus is misplaced. We're faced with this question: who will rule our hearts and minds? Will it be earthly powers with politicians and temporary agendas, or will we choose to make God great again in our lives, in our communities, in our churches? Of course, I'm proposing that the path to make America great again lies in the process of making God great again. Now, I want you to hear this very clearly, right? I'll kind of slow down for a moment here, because we live in a period right now that when you make a statement like this, make God great again, it gets convoluted, it gets mixed in with what we call Christian nationalism these days. I am not talking about Christian nationalism. I'm not talking about imposing Christianity on our nation that is a diverse nation. That's a nation of many religions. This is one of the reasons I was proud to serve as a Navy chaplain, was to uphold the Constitution, that all people of all matters of life, of all religions, that their right to freedom of religion would be protected. Making God great again is about recognizing a need for a society that is grounded in ethical principles of compassion, right? And has a sense of higher purpose. And I do believe that Christians play a major role in that. When I say make God great again, I'm not advocating that we should legislate Christianity. I don't get caught up in the. I remember being on the west coast of Florida and a lot of folks were saying the reason we're where we are is because we took prayer out of school. I'm not in that camp. I'm not talking about legislating, that we should say the Lord's Prayer every day, Or that we should say the Pledge of Allegiance and the pledge to the Christian flag, right? I'm an advocate for religious freedom, not privileges for Christians, right? When I say make God great again, I'm talking about personal and Christian communities. Have you made God great again in your life? Have we as a church made God great again? That's the ultimate aim in that statement. It's simply to provoke within you. Yes, I am using a provocative statement. How many of you have heard that statement? Make America great again. And some of you felt provoked by that. I purposely chose that, not knowing that all the other things, because I want you to be provoked to ask yourself the question, is there proof that I believe God is great in my life? Our kids, since they've been knee-high to a grasshopper, we started with them with that prayer. We still say that prayer. God is great, right? Well, is there evidence that God is great? Is there proof that you believe that? Is my life governed by principles of justice for all, compassion towards all, human dignity towards all people? Making God great again means you're striving to be a Christian who believes your greatness is found through your moral character and your spiritual values, not a national identity. In other words, as a Christian, you don't believe that you're greater than a Hindu, a Muslim, or a Baptist, or a Buddhist. You just believe that's not a slip there. It's like, well, how'd you go from Muslim to suddenly Baptist? I'm not trying to, I meant to say Buddhist, but Baptist came out. So I'll give you both. You just believe you have an important responsibility to express justice, compassion, and mercy towards all people. Finally, when I say make God great again, I'm not calling for a theocracy, right? Or for America to be a Christian nation. Now, I'm not against America being a Christian nation, but in this case, I'm specifically talking about personal responsibility. I'm specifically talking about you and us, the United Methodist Church of the Palm Beaches. Are we making God great again? And while there are a lot of similarities between Israel and America in this story, there's one glaring difference. Israel was a theocracy. It was made up of a loose union of tribes, like we might say, of our states. And what held these tribes together was God as the direct leader of all tribes, and they had a constitution and they had this law. But God was the ultimate ruler and authority over Israel. Judges and prophets were the leaders, and these people were divinely appointed by God. It was their responsibility to act on God's behalf. And when that failed, it starts this chain of events that happens. Right? When Moses goes up the mountain, what happens? Aaron has stayed down. He's got responsibility. He doesn't take that responsibility serious enough, so what happens? The folks start to worship a golden calf. Right? So when we as Christians fail in our responsibility, it has a chain of events. So what happens? The elders gather together and they come to Samuel at Ramah. They say to him, "You are old, and your sons do not follow your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have." The people demanded a human king. It not only altered Israel's political structure, it also represented now a significant spiritual transformation. Israel was now becoming a nation choosing to become more aligned with the ways of the world, but God had set them apart. They were to be a holy nation, right? It was by setting them apart, it would lead other people, but now they're like, we want to become like the nations around us. And so the people had a desire for a king. Israel, tired of their situation, looked around at other nations, and they wanted to have a king. They wanted a king that would fight for them, a king that would fight their battles, a king that would lead them in strength. And Samuel said, they said to Samuel, give us a king to lead us. They believed that a human king would solve their problems and unite them, even though they already had the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Sound familiar? Right? We can see similar things today in our own political arena. Many people believe that if we just elect the right leader, if we just pass the right laws, everything will fall into place. Sometimes we might even say it in our own household, right? If you'll just listen to me, there won't be any problems, right? Yet, like Israel, we sometimes look to human solutions for divine problems. It's a heart problem we're talking about, but politics and leaders come and go. True? Yeah. The real solution lies in submitting to the leadership of God, who knows our hearts, our nation, and our future. I want to share with you just these final points on how we can make God great again. 1, trust and hope in God. When the world offers easier, flashier solutions, let go of the belief that a human leader can bring salvation. Remember, your hope is not in governments, parties, or personalities. Any relief from this world they provide will only be temporary. And nobody wants to go through life without having any relief. You just need to know that the relief you're experiencing right now is not forever. God gives you the full, right? For Christians, our hope is placed in the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. So instead of getting trapped and caught up in the bitterness and divisiveness of politics, we look to God as our ultimate leader. He's the one who guides us in truth and righteousness. Number 2, live by kingdom values. Jesus calls us to live differently. He calls us to love our enemies, to pray for those who persecute us, to be peacemakers. God invites us, Jesus invites us, he modeled for us to serve without expectations. When Jesus knelt down and began to wash the feet of his disciples and he got up, did he say to them, "Now wash my feet"? No. He expected what? His disciples to go and do just as he had done. We are to go and serve. We serve not to be served, but to serve. When we choose to live by these values, we're making God's greatness known to a world that desperately needs his love. Number 3, to make God great again, remember who's in control. No matter the outcomes of any election, no matter the chaos around us, God is still in charge. We are still his beloved masterpiece. We are still his children. He has not walked out on us. He has not abandoned us. He has not given up on us. Yes, we have done things and we continue to do things, especially the ways in which we are treating one another, that has disappointed God. Because God knows we are capable of doing so much more. When God created humanity and he looked at that creation, what were the words that God said about that creation? It is very good. Right? God looks at us and he says, you guys, you're capable of so much more. We don't need to be anxious or fearful. We can stand in the truth that God's kingdom will never end and his purposes will be fulfilled. What's his purpose? His purpose is to find the lost sheep. His purpose is to restore that which has been broken. His purpose is to come alongside those who have said, "I don't know who you are." And he says, "I'm your Father. You're my masterpiece." And his method for achieving his purpose is not through coercion or guilt, it's through love. God said, "I love you so much, I'll give my life for you." In 1 Samuel 8, the Israelites chose to place their hope in a king, rejecting the God who had led them so faithfully. And again, today we face a similar temptation to place our hope in our political systems, our leaders, our movements. I am not advocating do not be involved, right, in politics. I'm not advocating to separate yourselves from the things that are going on in this community. I very much believe we need to be a part of those things. And I'm not saying you can't put hope in those things. I just don't put all of my hope in that, right? But in the midst of it all, we are called to make a different choice. We're called to make God great again, not by putting him in competition with others, but by recognizing that God has always been and always will be great. As Christians during this contentious election season, we can choose to make God great again in our hearts, our minds, and our actions. And so this week, I'm going to invite you to examine your heart and ask, where am I placing my trust these days? Is it in God or is it in something else? And I'm going to ask us to choose together to make God great again by putting him first in everything that you do. That's what Matthew says, seek first the kingdom of God, and all things will be added. Let's choose to follow him as our king and let his greatness shine through us, bringing peace, unity, and love to a world that desperately needs it. We do that when we choose first to make God great again in our lives. Amen.